Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Social Work Bubble podcast. I'm your host, Laura. I'm a licensed master social worker here in New York, and today we welcome a special guest, Carleigh Baker, who will be getting into all things school social work. Thank you so much, Carleigh, for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be on and talk a little bit more about school social work and what I do, and really just teach others more about the field and how they can get into it, and hopefully provide some tips and education for those who may already be doing it.
Exciting. Great. Now, before we get started, for those listening, don't forget to like, share, and follow the podcast on whatever platform you're using, and we will dive in. So, Carleigh, as we get started, can you introduce yourself to the listeners, including your background and what you're currently doing?
My name is Carleigh Baker, and I graduated in May 2022 with my MSW, and I had an emphasis in school social work. So in Illinois, where I'm from, you have to have be on a special track and have a certification. It's called a professional educator's license to become a social worker in the state. So I live close to the St. Louis area. I know when you say Illinois, people automatically think Chicago, and I'm about 4.5 hours away, much closer to St. Louis. So prior to becoming a school social worker, I worked in an inpatient psychiatric hospital for about 3.5 years as a tech. And some people are familiar with that and some people aren't. It's kind of like a nurse's assistant in a way. We really help oversee the unit, assist the nurses, provide groups, and supervise the patients. So I really got to work with a lot of different populations when I was doing that job. I had experience with adults that had co-occurring substance abuse and mental health issues, children with mental health concerns, geriatric, psych patients, and adults with severe mental illnesses and disabilities. So, introduce me to a little bit of everything. And then I also worked as a case manager and did some crisis calls and follow-ups for a community mental health agency. And in that, I worked primarily with adults and kids. So most of all, I would say I really enjoy working with kids, especially teens. And now I'm a school social worker at a high school. This will be my third year working for the district. The first year I was a full-time intern. Last year was my first official year after graduation. And our district has around 1,200 kids. And we also serve a military base.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah. So that lends for some very unique experiences in serving and working with that population, because we have students that have really lived all over the world, and it's just a really, really unique place because it's kind of, it's military, it's suburban, it's rural, all at once. So it's a pretty unique school.
Wow. That sounds like it would be really interesting to work there then.
Yes, definitely. And we also have, so about 50% of our enrollment are students with military affiliation. So one or both parents are in the military. So we actually have a military family life counselor who works at our school to help provide support to those students. So that's something really cool that we have too.
Absolutely. It makes sense too. I mean, kind of tailoring the support that the kids would need for what's going on for them. That's great.
Yes, definitely. And, our military counselor does a lot of really awesome things for the kids. We have month of the military child, week of the military child, and just kind of some ways to help those students feel a little bit more welcome, because they do face a lot of challenges that other students who may have been in the district for most of their lives may not have faced.
Right. Very true. So, I mean, in this role at this school, how would you define the school social worker role?
So First and foremost, we are mental health professionals who work with the school community. So that's students, parents, teachers, administrators, to help support positive student outcomes and success. We are really helping address barriers to student academic and emotional success. We provide crisis intervention to students and help them learn positive and healthy ways of coping. We work with teachers in providing ways to support challenges they may be facing with the students, and we provide resources and tools when needed. We assist in helping to promote a safe school environment and work a lot with parents to help them understand their students' needs and encourage them to participate in their child's education. We work with the community in identifying resources that may help meet the needs of students and their families. And I think one of the most important things is that we really strive to eliminate the stigma associated with mental health and really create a safe space and a welcoming space for all students.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. Now, so I mean, I know a lot of people, like, they hear school social worker. I know some schools also have like guidance counselors, school psychologists. What differs for the school social worker that kind of makes them different from these other professionals that we see?
So this is a really great question, and I still find myself, having to kind of clarify this a little bit because our roles are so different, and I don't think a lot of people really know like the nitty gritty of like what each role does and what it consists of.
Right.
And I just kind of want to preface this by saying that these roles can look very different based on the state that you live in as well as the school district. So I'm kind of sharing from my own experiences, and there's also a lot of like overlap among the roles. And ultimately, we do work together as a team to support the student needs and like the social emotional well-being of our school. So in my district, the school psychologist is really like the gatekeeper for special education services. So like for a student that may have a disability and need an IEP or that's an individualized education plan, the school psychologist does all of the initial testing, evaluations, and screening for that. They do like the eligibility testing for the annual reviews for the IEP. They do a lot of data collection, observations, and assessments to identify the student needs. So it's very much like, I don't want to say that our roles as social worker like isn't formal or that we don't do a lot of paperwork, because you and I both know that's not true.
Right.
But it's very much like they do a lot of like the testing, the paperwork, the formalities, and those types of things to ensure that a student that has a disability gets the services that they need to have academic success.
Right. Okay. So it definitely sounds like with the psychologist, it's more assessment testing focused.
Yes.
Right. Interesting. And does your school also have like a guidance counselor as well, or some other kind of professionals?
Yes. So we have 3 guidance counselors at our school, and they really do more of like the academic piece. So they are going to be the ones that help the students with like course selections, scheduling, post high school planning. They ensure that they have enough credits to graduate. They administer like the big academic testing, like the SAT, the ACT. They help students with like their college applications, scholarships, transcripts, and other things that they need to prepare for college, essentially. And a big part of their role, especially, since I mentioned we do serve a military base, so we have a population that's always got kids moving in and out. The counselors really help orient the students to the school that are moving in.
Right. Wonderful. That's so interesting because I mean, I grew up in a very small town, and I don't think I ever knew who the social worker or psychologist was. Like, I only ever knew the guidance counselor. And that was the case for a lot of other people where, I mean, even at that point, I didn't even know social workers were a thing either. So it's really helpful to kind of understand the differences that are there and the different kind of supports that students have access to.
Yes, I agree with you. That was very much my educational experience growing up. I went to a school that it was like a junior junior high and a high school combined.
Mm-hmm.
So there were like 350 kids, 7th through 12th grade. Like I'm talking like 30 kids in my class, give or take. And we didn't really even have a social worker. Like I never even, like I'm with you. I never really even knew what that was or that job even existed. We had our guidance counselors, and if we had like a mental health problem or like an emotional concern, we would go to that person. So
Right.
like I said, you know, the roles do very much like overlap, and there are a lot of things that the duties that we share, but working in a bigger school, it's definitely a little bit more of a defined role, and like these are the go-to people for these certain things.
Right. Which is also, I feel like, more helpful for students to have that, because then there's a specific person they know they can go to and is actually experienced. And like in social work, we're specialized. We have a certain education, like we have a certain background that guidance counselors and psychologists don't have. And so to have that overlap, obviously I can see why that happens, but it's so important that kids get that like care that they need.
Yes, I agree. So really how a social worker differs from that role, from those roles of guidance counselor and psychologist is, we're the ones that are providing the direct therapeutic services to all students. So, the gen ed students and the special ed students, and we do this through individual sessions, group sessions. We work with students, families, the school community to connect them with resources to help meet their needs. Like I mentioned earlier, we are working with students to address barriers that are inhibiting their academic and social success. We're really the go-to resource for mental health concerns and crisis response. So typically, you know, if a student does have something going on and they share that with their guidance counselor, like, hey, I'm experiencing a lot of anxiety right now or depression, then the guidance counselor comes to us and they say, hey, you know, I think that this would be a student that may be good for you to check in on and kind of build that relationship with. So we're really like doing the majority of the significant mental health needs that arise in our school.
Okay, wonderful. Now, what does the typical caseload look like? Because I'm imagining then that like all the students could potentially be clients. So what does that look like, and what does the responsibilities look like in your day to day?
So at my school, I'm one of 2 social workers, and how we have it broken up is, I work with the 11th and 12th graders, and the other social worker works with the 9th and 10th graders.
Okay.
So I would say about my caseload, parentheses around caseload, is around 600 students, because I'm technically available to all the students, and I try to make that very clear to them. Like, I'm not just available for certain kids. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm meeting with and seeing all 600 of those students.
Right.
But I would say that I kind of have my caseload separated a little bit between like the students that I serve in the special education setting and the general education setting. And I can kind of clarify that a little bit, but I have about 20 students that I work with that have IEPs with social work minutes on them. So when I say that, I mean like per their IEP, there's been a social emotional deficit identified, and that's where the social worker comes in to help create a goal and identify ways that the student can work on achieving that goal. So we either work with them directly or indirectly through consultation, which basically means that we work with the teacher to kind of help them brainstorm ways to support the student. And then directly we have that goal, and the goal may be like something along the lines of a student will identify 3 positive ways to deal with distressing emotions. And then we're talking about like different coping skills, different social supports that they can use, and those types of things to really help them meet that goal. If they're struggling with like anger, anxiety, those types of things, then we find ways to help them work through that. So those students, the 20 or so, I typically see them on a bi-weekly basis, but that's kind of the standard. But I do have students that I see weekly or once a month. So it really just kind of depends on their level of need and what exactly it is that we're working on.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. Now, I mean, how do you manage a caseload like that? Because I feel like in social work, it's very normal for social workers to feel like they have to help everyone. But with something like that, like you really can't.
Yeah, it definitely requires a lot of balance and flexibility and scheduling. So like I mentioned, I work with the gen ed kids a lot too. And I would say I probably have about 30, give or take, general education students that I work with consistently. So we also have our walk-ins and our crisis that comes up throughout the day. And these are sometimes students that I don't have an existing relationship with. So the biggest thing for me is just like really learning to be flexible. Because you could be in your office, like working, planning out the day and just like writing who you're going to see and when, and then like a crisis comes up and that kind of changes the whole course of the morning, the afternoon, sometimes the whole day.
Right.
So I really try to front load my week and see as many of my kids that I can on Monday and Tuesday. So I've noticed that as the week goes on, we typically get more busy and have issues that arise. So I like to plan to see my IEP students at the beginning of the week. So that way, if something comes up too, I can move things around. I try to keep a schedule with time blocks and write my student names in the schedule. I keep a running log of all the students I see, the time spent with them, and some notes about what we discussed. And one big thing I'm really working on this year especially is just like setting better boundaries, prioritizing, and reminding myself that it's okay to say no, that I'm only one person.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with a caseload like that. Oh my gosh. Now, for you, I mean, in this situation, with your experience that you have, how many social workers would be ideal for you within a school?
Well, the School Social Worker Association of America, the NASW, they've kind of set some standards for how many social workers should be like per one student or per the amount of students. So it's like a one social worker to like 250 students. But this is not at all the norm in the school social work field at all. I mean, I feel like that's generally like pretty unheard of for a school to have that ratio. Of course, it's the most ideal, but it isn't the most realistic.
Right. Yeah. Cause I mean, again, I'm thinking about like my school experience. I think there was one social worker for the entire district. And, I was in a small district, but that's still thousands of students.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that we are all noticing that like the needs of our students and mental health needs like as a whole across all populations are only like on the rise. Like
Right.
it is not slowing down.
Mm-mm.
And I was listening to one of your other like podcast episodes that you did with, I think her name was Marissa, like a master of public health, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And something that she said that like really resonated with me and like the conversation you guys were having was like, at this point in time, like it will never be enough. Like
Yeah.
we just have to go in and do like the best that we can and just know like, and be okay with that because we cannot attend to everyone's needs and fix everything and try to solve everybody's problems. I mean, that's just a recipe for burnout and it
Mm-hmm.
really is just so unrealistic. And if you have that expectation, it's going to be really hard for you to thrive as a social worker.
Absolutely. Cause it's not realistic. And then it puts pressure, but things aren't able to sustain itself in that kind of way.
Right.
Mm. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay. Now, so when you mentioned earlier too, some other professionals that are also within the school, there's also administration, there's teachers at the school, other types of staff. What does collaboration look like with those other roles outside of like the psychologist and the guidance counselor?
So, we work a lot with them specifically the most, I would say, like the guidance counselors and the psychologists, and the administrators on like student intervention teams. So we meet regularly to discuss students who are struggling and kind of brainstorm some ways that we can help support them and meet their needs. We also have regular meetings with our district social workers and student services team to discuss challenges that we're facing and just some ways that we can improve social emotional learning within our district. And we also work with like the special education staff, parents, and the student services team in the IEP process. So we're like attending those meetings, providing our input and how we work with the students and what we feel are some good goals and things for them to achieve. We're
Mm-hmm.
listening to the parents' concerns and helping address any needs that they may have related to their child's social emotional concerns. And we also have a school resource officer who is very good and he's available to allow us to kind of bounce ideas off of him and helps with like some of the tasks that we do, like home visits, and works alongside us if we're dealing with anything that may require legal action or expertise.
Mm-hmm.
And, we also work a lot with teachers to kind of help them brainstorm ways that they can work with students who may be facing some challenges or if they're having issues with like classroom management or motivation with their students. We can go in and help talk with the students about that or just kind of give the teacher some tips and tricks to help them work with their students in that way.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Wow. So, a lot of support and collaboration amongst many different people involved with students. Wow.
Oh, yes, for sure.
Do you ever notice any like pushback from particular people or maybe just a disconnect in understanding? Because social workers do come with a lot of knowledge. Obviously, we're educated, we're skilled in all of that. Is there ever any like teachers or parents or administrators that maybe aren't really getting what you're saying or recommending?
So naturally, I kind of feel like there is some disconnect because like most administrators, not most, I would say pretty much all administrators, especially in my district, have experience working in the classroom. And then obviously teachers, they're in the classroom working with students every single day. School social workers, like, you don't have to have been a teacher before you become a school social worker. Right. So like me, I don't have any experience working in the classroom. So I know like that can kind of create some disconnect because I don't really know what that's like. I'm not genuinely sure of the true like struggles and issues that teachers are facing. So, and I don't really understand the challenges entirely. So I think that kind of adds a layer of difficulty when it comes to like building that relationship and just like having other people that we work with take our roles like legitimately and seriously.
Right. Certainly. What have you found helped support those relationships or like understanding between different professionals?
So I think like the most important thing is like working with the teachers and the school staff to help them understand our role and like communicate our role and explaining what it is exactly what we do and what we can help with. Doing observations in classrooms to get to know more about the teachers and students. I also, try to participate in activities that the teachers are organizing. So like their students are giving presentations and they're looking for volunteers to judge them. Like I want to be somebody who goes in there and listens. I really try to participate in activities that are organized for staff outside of school. I feel like this really helps people kind of get to know you and strengthen that relationship. And this kind of ties in to that rapport building that is also really, really important. And there was one other thing I kind of wanted to mention and circle back to about like the pushback. I wouldn't, in my experience, I wouldn't say that this is something that I've dealt with. Like generally everyone that I work with has been pretty welcoming and supportive of my role. And I know that that's not the case for other social workers. You join groups or you go to different, like trainings and people kind of share their experiences and sometimes it's pretty negative and that can be really hard. And it kind of just goes back to like, maybe they don't fully understand what we do or like they don't want to give us enough credit because we haven't been in the classroom. That's kind of like a big thing, but I would say that like my team is very supportive and values my opinion and expertise. And they feel like, I have something very different to offer about, how to help a student or what challenges they may be facing and those types of things. One thing that I feel like has been really good, especially like in my case, is that my principal, like our head principal, she always has my back 100%. Like if we as a social worker, like for example, I had, some safety concerns about a student and I said like, the parent needs to come pick this student up. Like I'm not letting them go home by themselves. Like absolutely not. And my principal had my back 100% in that and like would not waver like with the parent. So having that is really important because I don't know about you, but I haven't always experienced that type of support in other jobs that I've had.
Right. Absolutely. Which is not helpful because we need that support in order to be effective. Like you're obviously coming in saying that that's something important for a reason. And so to have other people take you seriously also helps everyone else, like parents and students and the other professionals, do that same thing.
definitely. And I would say like another thing, a common thing I've seen other social workers talk about is like the challenges that come with like teachers and admin with confidentiality and like the types of things we can share about students.
Right.
So I try to like go by, it's a very much like need to know basis. Like if there are big issues that we're dealing with, we want to keep our administrators in the know. Like these are things like suicide and threat assessments, bullying,
Right.
any type of harassment, inappropriate behavior. Like those are things that we want to communicate with our admin. Like when it basically, you know, when we would have to break confidentiality anyway, because it pertains to someone's well-being and safety, that is when, you know, we want to notify our admin. We also notify them when we do like a DCFS report. So they are kind of like, obviously not like the big details, but just let them know like, hey, this is happening because school safety is super important. So if we're going to have caseworkers and different people coming into our school, it's important that, you know, our admin has a know of like what exactly is going on.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's huge. Now, I mean, with stuff like that, like with those safety issues, has that also been like pretty well supported or taken seriously in your experience?
Yeah, I think so. Mostly it's almost always taken seriously by like administrators. But sometimes the challenges come with like parents, like they may not take it entirely seriously. So that's when it also helps to sometimes have, you know, an administrator on your side, because when an administrator calls and says, you know, like, I'm with the social worker and this is, you know, an issue that your student is experiencing, I think parents are a little bit more inclined to listen.
Yeah.
So
That's very true, because I think I found it's very easy, I think, for parents to, and because when I worked with kids, for many other reasons, because of my age, because I was fresh out of grad school, but also because like just that social work role could have some negative connotations to it. Like parents were very easy to dismiss what I had to say. So to have like someone like an administrator come in does help them like take it seriously and be like, oh, okay, this is seen to be a problem from other people too.
yes, that is exactly why, you know, I like to have them on my team and, you know, in my corner, because when I do have an issue like that, I like to be able to call on them and just say, look, this is what I'm thinking. And I feel like, you know, the parent is not hearing me. You know, what can we do to rectify this? And they're like they're always like, got my back and willing to step in and help me, which is extremely valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I'm thinking too, like, and just how you're describing the role and the responsibility that you have, the caseload that you have, like, there's so many things that are your responsibility and just the work hours that you have. So in order to be as effective as possible, we need that support to make sure, you know, to not create any further issues so we can just be efficient and get our job done.
Yes, definitely.
Wonderful. Now, I mean, at least because you work in the high school part, I want to touch on like building rapport real quickly, especially with teens, because I've noticed for a lot of social workers, at least what I've seen on social media, like teens get a bad reputation. Like I've seen a lot of social workers that hate on working with teens, and I particularly enjoy it. But what have you noticed has been really helpful in building rapport with teenagers?
Something that I think is extremely helpful and valuable is visibility and approachability. So I want to be the one that's like out in the hallways in the morning, like when the kids are coming in, like telling them good morning, have a good day, greeting them by name, like just really being that person that happy person that they get to start their day with. I think that is super important, and it really helps like set the tone for the day, and it really helps the students feel seen and heard, which is extremely important to feel that way in adolescence, I think, because that's like the time of your life where you feel like nobody understands me, like nobody's paying attention to me. So just like being there in that aspect, I feel is really helpful. I also really try to use like my sense of humor and find any way I can to like make the students laugh and just like be silly with them. That is really like one of the ways I'm able to connect with people, is just like by using my sense of humor. I also think it's really important to have things like snacks and candy and like a good, like things that I enjoy. So it's like, yeah, I want to like have what I enjoy, you know, here for me, but also for you, because that makes people more comfortable. Just like having a safe space with like lots of fidget toys and good lighting, and like it smells good, it's comfortable, just like a place where they feel like they can come in and unwind and just like drop all of their, you know, worries onto me. Like that is really the most important thing that I want to do. And I think like when you ask them about their music and shows and sports and video games and get to know them like outside of the school setting, that's really valuable too.
Absolutely. To actually take an interest. And I've noticed that too. And when I was working with a lot of teens, I think they also come in thinking, oh, I have to talk to the therapist or I have to talk to the school social worker. And they have this like expectation of what it's going to be. Like they have to disclose all this stuff or do all that. And like just to ease them in and kind of just like have an enjoyable time together, do things that are very low stakes, just fun things, play games, have some candy, like to build that rapport and to help them feel comfortable is huge.
Yes, I think so too. And I also really like to be transparent with my students, especially about like confidentiality. And, you know, if I do have to break that confidentiality, I encourage them, you know, like, hey, this is a conversation that I think, you know, we need to share with your parents. Do you want to be a part of it? Do you want me to? Like just making them feel like they are a participant in an active participant in their treatment. Like I'm not going to go and do anything behind their back, like keep them in the know of what's going on. I think that's really important too. That way they don't feel blindsided, or they don't feel like you don't have their best interests at heart.
Right. It can very quickly feel like a betrayal. So we want to like give them as much information so they can feel empowered too and in control.
Yes.
Right. Now, I mean, I'm kind of wrapping up a little bit and thinking about people that are maybe thinking about pursuing school social work, already in the school social worker role. What's just one piece of advice that you would give to those people?
So something that I feel is really important to remember and remind yourself of is that you can do anything, but you can't do everything. So
very true.
Yes. The biggest struggle as a social worker for me personally has been like the pressure and like the sense of urgency to kind of solve all the world's problems and fix everything and attend to everyone's needs. And I think a lot of social workers can probably relate to that because, you know, we're like superheroes. We want to like help everybody. We want to like do all these things and achieve all these things, but it's just like really important to remind yourself that it's not realistic, and it's a recipe for burnout, and it's just really important to have those boundaries. And like I said, you know, you have to remind yourself that you're only one person and you are enough. Like the work that you're doing is enough. And you can make a much bigger impact by just like doing what you can without like overstepping your limits. That's kind of what I think is like, you know, you can make a bigger impact if you're really taking care of yourself and putting the work into yourself so you can be not only the best version of yourself, but the best version of yourself for your clients.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, especially with the amount of students that you work with, I mean, there will always be something to do. And so you have to really be intentional with taking that step back as you need to, knowing and having realistic expectations, because you're right, we can't do it all. And there will always be another person that needs help.
Yes. And it's like, it's really important to just like remind yourself that like today we live in a world where like so many things are like instant. Like we want instant gratification. We want things to happen right away, right? We can Google something and have the answer within seconds. But you know, in social work, sometimes people have to wait. Like it's just the reality of it. And we have to just be okay with people are going to have to wait on me, and that's fine. I don't have to solve all of the world's problems today.
Absolutely. Well, Carleigh, this has been such a great conversation. I feel like I learned a lot about school social work. And I think a lot of listeners also did. So thank you so much for coming on today. I feel like a lot of people can really take something helpful away. If listeners want to continue to follow your journey, where can they find you?
So, I have Instagram. That's pretty much where I'm the most active. My username is carleigh.ann93.
Great.
So I'm really kind of wanting to start building my social work platform and following. I'm currently under supervision for my LCSW. So I've got
exciting.
I'm like about a year or so in. So I have a little bit to go, but like I'm really wanting to kind of like build my career a little bit and do some different things as a social worker. So yeah, I really enjoyed being able to talk with you and have this experience. It's been really valuable. I hope that someone learned something from me today. I know I can kind of talk a lot. I could talk for hours about social work. I love it so much.
Well, it was all really, really helpful. And as always for our listeners, if anything resonated with you, feel free to like, comment, share. Carleigh's Instagram will be linked in the description below, so you can go follow her journey, and we will see you next time.